where the shootings happened, near the Arboretum. But then as the afternoon wore on, Yvonne, with the search happening by both air and on the ground, essentially after hours of searching came to the conclusion that they no longer believed that he was in the area. Then the search, of course, for him widened to a far more expansive area. And at that point, the investigation really turned to other avenues, other pursuits that law enforcement could possibly use to try to track him down.
On April 19, 2021, a 20-hour manhunt culminated in the arrest of 41-year-old Stephen Broderick following the brutal murder of 3 people: his ex-wife, his adopted 17-year-old daughter, and her boyfriend.
Let me see your hands. Stop right there. Interlock your fingers on top of your head. Turn around, face away from me. Do it now. Stop walking. Take 5 steps.
Man, 13, I'm not looking for. Major 21, they're attempting to detain. It appears he has a pistol in his waistband. Major 10, we got one detained. Okay.
What was supposed to be a peaceful, court-mandated supervised custody visit in northwest Austin led to the death of 2 promising high school students and a mother whose only crime was allowing her son to have a relationship with his father. At 11:45 a.m. in the seemingly peaceful Arboretum Oaks apartment parking lot, Amanda Broderick had driven to meet Broderick for a custody visit with her 17-year-old daughter, Alyssa, and Alyssa's 18-year-old high school sweetheart and fellow athlete, Willie Simmons. Shortly after their arrival, reports indicated that Stephen rammed into their car, likely to prevent them from escaping, before opening fire on everyone inside the vehicle. Miraculously, 9-year-old Caden Broderick escaped the gunfire unharmed. He ran to a passing motorist's vehicle and asked them to call 911. When officers arrived minutes later, they found 3 shooting victims lying near 2 vehicles that appeared to have been involved in a crash. The victims had sustained gunshot wounds, and EMT personnel performed CPR. Unfortunately, all 3 victims died shortly afterward. Stephen had planned to visit his son, Caden, whom he shares with Amanda Broderick. Caden, who turned 10 2 days after the incident, had brought a tres leches cake for his dad, only to witness a tragedy that would leave him scarred for life. By the time the police arrived, Broderick had already fled the scene. However, the visit facilitator arrived in her car just as he was leaving. Unfortunately, this incident would have been prevented if the judiciary had heeded Alyssa's warnings. Although she was only 16 at the time, Alyssa pleaded with the judge to keep Stephen away from her after learning of his release in early July 2020. You see, at the time of the event, Stephen was out on bond while facing felony charges related to his sexual assault case involving Alyssa. The allegations expanded to include accusations of strangulation and years of abuse. Alyssa also stated that a protective order would be nothing more than a piece of paper unless proper measures were enforced. Therefore, the judge presiding over the sexual assault case ruled that Broderick must wear a monitoring device on his ankle. Just 5 months later, in October, the GPS tracker was removed after Broderick's attorney filed a request for its removal. The attorney highlighted that Broderick had gone 142 days without any significant violations and had complied with the protective order. Little did they know that this was all part of Broderick's plan. Broderick wasn't a fringe criminal with a history of violence. He was a trusted lawman, someone the system believed in. He was a former detective with the Travis County Sheriff's Office, specializing in property crimes. Additionally, he worked as an investigator for the Bastrop County Sheriff's Office, a position that he had held since March 16, 2008. This was a man who understood the law and swore to uphold it. His career was largely scandal-free, with only one incident that resulted in his placement on administrative leave. In March 2013, Broderick and Deputy Mark Garcia responded to reports of a family disturbance. Upon arrival, they found 78-year-old Jose Manuel Cantu holding a firearm outside his house. The deputies repeatedly instructed Cantu to drop his weapon, but he did not comply and instead pointed it at them. In response, the deputies opened fire, shooting Cantu multiple times, including in the head. He was transported to a hospital where he was pronounced dead. The situation would not have sparked so much controversy if all the reports around the incident had been consistent. The neighbors had informed reporters that Cantu was in a wheelchair when the police arrived, and could have been disarmed in a non-lethal way. However, an official from the sheriff's office claimed that the elderly man was not in a wheelchair at the time of the incident, throwing up the possibility that both deputies were a bit trigger-happy. Broderick returned to active duty at the Travis County Sheriff's Office. Just when it seems he had gotten his life back on track with his job, he found himself involved in another scandal that would bring him under public scrutiny once again, this time involving someone close to home, his stepdaughter.
Said something. The then 16-year-old broke her silence in June 2020. Court documents state her stepdad and adoptive father, Stephen Broderick, then a Travis County Sheriff's detective, had been sexually abusing her since March.
There's physical DNA at the hospital. How is that not her voice? How is that not enough? Do you understand that she had to literally take the DNA, hold it in her hand, tell her mom what happened, go all the way to the hospital, hand it over to somebody else, and tell her story? And today they are silencing her. Today they're saying it doesn't matter.
Stephen was indicted on 12 counts of physical and sexual abuse. Tuesday, they were all dropped against Alyssa's family's wishes.
And when she spoke up, in her outcry, in her very own words, she said, "It's not like I could tell the police. My dad is the police." What message are we sending?
Broderick was charged with sexually assaulting his stepdaughter for months, leading up to her speaking up and involving her mother and the authorities. His job as a sheriff made Alyssa hesitant to break up at first, but as soon as she had hard evidence against him, she bravely told her story to all those who cared to listen. The disturbing details of the case put Broderick in a difficult position. He was booked into jail and placed on administrative leave. In an effort to preserve whatever dignity and respect he had left, he ultimately chose to quietly resign from the police force. But it didn't end there. The case had thrown a wrench in the wheel of his marriage to Amanda, who did not only file for divorce on the grounds of sexual assault, but also filed for a protective order to keep him away from Amanda and her kids. Broderick spent 16 days in jail before posting bail by paying 10% of the initial $100,000 bond, which was later reduced to $50,000 after his attorney pleaded to have it reduced. Then, a few months into their divorce, Broderick violated the restraining order by sending an email that contained intimate photos of her, in what the prosecution claimed was a blackmail. The judge was then ordered for his bond to be increased to $75,000. The court also ordered Broderick to surrender his service weapon to the authorities, and he was also prohibited from acquiring any firearm, so it came as a surprise to the police when they arrested him and found a gun on his waistband. But beneath the badge and the courtroom paperwork, something was brewing, and on April 18th, it all exploded into the open. Once the police confirmed that Stephen Broderick was the shooter, an immediate search was launched across central Texas. By Sunday afternoon, April 18th, authorities had locked down the entire northwest corridor of Austin, with helicopters hovering and roads blocked. After a couple hours, a citywide shelter-in-place was issued by the Austin police, meaning anyone within a mile radius of the shooting scene was to stay indoors. By nightfall, armed SWAT teams swept the neighborhoods near the Arboretum and still couldn't see any signs for him. They then feared that he might have been at the border, ready to abscond to Mexico. But then, at around 7 a.m. the next day, they made a breakthrough. Some residents called 911, reporting a suspicious man walking along Old Kimbrough Road near Manor, a rural, open stretch of land just outside the city. When officers from the Manor Police Department arrived on the scene, they approached with caution, as they were aware of his past experience in the force. But to their muted surprises, Broderick was compliant and seemingly accepted his fate.
Let me see your hands. Stop right there. Interlock your fingers on top of your head. Turn around, face away from me. Do it now. Stop walking. Take 5 steps.
May 13, I'm out with. Maker 21, they're attempting to detain. It appears he has a pistol in his waistband. Matter 10, we got one detained.
At At that moment, the over 19-hour-long manhunt came to an end. But the question had only just begun. How did a former sheriff's deputy evade arrest for nearly a full day in one of the most surveilled areas of Texas? Did someone help him? Was this entire act premeditated beyond the shooting? And perhaps the most haunting thought would be, what would have happened if they hadn't caught him that morning? Broderick was brought in for questioning, with hopes of hearing his side of the story and discovering if there was another angle to all this that nobody knew. However, his response to the questions made the detective's blood run cold.
Hey, Michael, my name's Jason. I just need to tell them you don't really feel like talking about what's going on with us. I know that you know the deal, so I'm not going to insult your intelligence or anything.
No doubt.
If you wanted to speak with us and you know the deal, we'd read you Miranda, and the lead detective, he's not here right now. He could be here in 15 minutes, or I could talk to you if that's something you want to do. But in the meantime, we're waiting for our crime scene to come up here. Take the photographs of you, collect your clothes. You know the deal, right? So hang out here for a minute. Do you want to talk with us and kind of explain your side of what's going on, or anything?
I don't have a side to explain. You got a warrant already?
Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah,
there's nothing for me to explain. You said you have some stuff to do. I'm just waiting on. I'm waiting on that so I can go where I need to go get settled, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, like I said, I mean, you know the deal, so I'm not gonna insult your intelligence.
For a man who had been arrested for killing his wife, her daughter, and her boyfriend, you would expect a bit more remorse or regret in the tone of his voice. Rather, he sounded confident and unbothered. If only he knew that this had become more of a public trial. The incident occurred during a time when a series of high-profile mass shootings had taken place across the country, leading to heightened public concern. After the interrogation, Broderick confessed to committing the crime, and his information was recorded before he was booked into the county jail. With Stephen Broderick finally in custody, the legal system shifted into motion. But for the masses, especially those who knew Amanda and Alyssa, it was hard not to feel like the system had failed long before the first shot was ever fired.
They would still be alive had they kept him in jail and had they listened to Amanda and Alyssa. They did not listen to them. They ignored their pleas for help.
Broderick was indicted on 3 counts of capital murder, 1 for each of his victims. This charge reflects the seriousness of killing multiple people in a single criminal act and signifies the prosecution's intent to seek the most severe penalties under the Texas law. If convicted, he could face the death penalty or life in prison without the possibility of parole. The readings of his charges left the crowd outside the courthouse with mixed feelings. While they were pleased to hear that he had pleaded guilty, they were taken aback by the fact that Broderick had accepted a plea deal. This deal resulted in the dismissal of 12 counts of physical and sexual assault, which went against the wishes of the victims' families. Although the sexual assault cases may seem less significant, as Broderick is unlikely to receive a lenient sentence, it is crucial to recognize that proving sexual and physical abuse can be challenging without the victim's testimony. However, because Broderick had tampered with the witnesses, rendering them unavailable to testify at the trial, the state can still introduce the witnesses' earlier statements made when the crime was reported. In addition to dropping all charges related to the assault on Alyssa, the plea deal also meant that Broderick would waive his right to appeal the capital murder conviction. At the same time, the death penalty would be taken off the table. After all was said and done, Broderick was sentenced to life in prison without the opportunity for parole. As the dust began to settle around the case, the city of Austin was left to feel the aftermath of a private tragedy that had now rippled out, leaving an entire school, a neighborhood, and 2 families broken in its wake. The first mention has to be Alyssa Broderick, and for a couple of reasons. Alyssa was only 17 years old before her tragic passing. She was bright, smart, and athletic. She had dreams of going to college and playing in the WNBA. For 3 years, she was part of Elgin High School's basketball and track teams, earning the respect and admiration of her coaches and teammates. After having to testify against her father by adoption in a sexual assault case, she carried the burdens of trauma with a strength that most adults couldn't manage. She was just getting started, said one of her teachers, struggling to find the words through tears. She was going to be something. She already was. Then there was her boyfriend, Willie Simmons III. He was also a student at Elgin High. He was a senior at Elgin High and had been recruited to play football at the University of North Texas. Willie was deeply beloved by friends and the coaches. He was described as an exceptional young man and a leader amongst his peers, the type that you would want your daughter to date. And lastly, Amanda Broderick. The 34-year-old nurse tried again and again to protect her children from the monster in their home. From filing for divorce, seeking protective orders, and obeying court orders from visitation, even when it terrified her, she did all that so she could keep them safe. And yet the system failed her. Peter Lopez, the attorney who represented her in the restraining order and the divorce proceedings, said in an interview that Amanda didn't want Broderick around her daughter, but hoped their son could continue to have a relationship with him. All she wanted was what was in the best interest of the kids, Lopez said. She did absolutely everything she could, and even to the point where it might have been a problem, because, like I said, she wanted the son and father to maintain a relationship. I really think her motive was the best interests of the children. Days after the deaths, mourners left pictures and flowers outside of Elgin High. Amanda's co-workers set up an online fundraiser that surpassed its goal within 24 hours. And then, one of Alyssa's close friends started a second fundraiser for Alyssa's little brother. 3 names are now carved into the memory of a community that will never be the same. But as the headlines fade and the court records close, we're left with something more difficult to process. Why did he do it? Why would a man who spent most of his life protecting life and properties turn on his own family and then kill them unprovoked? Could it have been to silence Alyssa in the sexual assault case? Then why kill her mother and boyfriend? Perhaps it was a way to get back at his wife for leaving him? Or maybe he was just an evil man who didn't think his thoughts through before pulling the trigger on 3 people. You never know what goes through a psycho's head. Since the details of his interrogations were never released, we're left with the thoughts of what must have led Broderick to carrying out such a heinous crime. But what are your thoughts on this? Do you think the system failed them? What could have been done to prevent it? Be sure to drop your thoughts and views in the comments. And if you think the story deserves to be heard, give it a like. For more raw, real stories like this, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell because you don't want to miss our next story. Thank you for watching.